Good evening. Welcome. Thank you, guys. When she said everybody's going to leave with something, I thought, oh shit, they're going to think it's like Oprah, where they're going to look like you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. I'm not there yet, but I don't have cars to offer. I apologize. I can hardly see you guys, but I can tell that you're wearing like proper clothes, and that's a switch for me, because typically I see most of you in like shorts and Lululemon clothes. So it's lovely that you came. Thank you for coming. Thank you for spending your evening here with me, with us. For me, you know, a lot of people say that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, but I believe that your time and your money. And you gave both, so I just want you guys to know that I'm aware of that, and I don't take that for granted, and I don't think I ever will, regardless of where this leads. So I need to tell you, first of all, why we're doing it in this theater. There's a significance to this theater. I have been here before. I don't mean that in like a past life kind of way. I've been in this theater before. When I was, and just so you know, just to put this all into context, my parents are in the audience, and so is my niece and my two nephews. And so, yeah, please, I can see you. And so they're going to be hearing some stories for the very first time, as well as, you know, you hearing them for the first time. So remember that, because there's a whole world happening up here that I'm working with right now. So I was here in I want to say 88. Over the summer of 1988, I was friends with these two girls, and we would go out every now and again. We would go out, and I guess I was, I don't know what, 14. We went out to a bar, and one of them brought a friend. Said, oh, I'm going to bring my friend Jamie. You know, he's a good guy. He'll meet us there, whatever. So we went to Gertz at McGill. Yeah? Okay. I think it's still there. In fact, I know it's still there because last year I did a meditation. I gave a meditation class as part of a Lymphoma Canada benefit, and I didn't realize that it was in the same building as Gertz until I was done and I was leaving. I was like, oh, I'm getting some weird flashbacks here. We went out to Gertz, and this guy, Jamie, said to us, oh, come, we'll go into the stairwell, and he pulled out a joint. And I had never smoked a joint before in my life, and I decided I wasn't going to inhale. I was going to do that thing. It didn't work. So that night, for me, Mom, Dad, you listening? That night for me, I have 3 flashes of what that night was. The first flash is being in the stairwell at Gertz, and if you've ever been there, you know that it's sort of got like a corrugated concrete wall. It's not of this earth. And so that's my first flash, is being in the stairwell. My second flash is being here. I don't know how I got here, but I was seated somewhere around there, and we were watching the film Caligula. I can't make it up. I had no control over it, but that's what was. So we're watching Caligula, and if you've ever seen that movie, it's pretty graphic. I mean, I have some very graphic images of what was being shown on the screen, well, where the screen used to be behind me. And I remember sort of like tuning in. This was happening. It was in front of me. I looked around. There were a bunch of very dodgy men doing very dodgy things to themselves. And then my next flash is I'm home in bed. I don't know how I got there. Not asking too many questions. So what's even funnier than that story is that I had a friend over for dinner a couple of months ago who shall remain unnamed, but is in the room, I believe, was supposed to be in the room. And I was saying, I was explaining to her why I wanted to do the show here, because for me it's a full circle moment. It's like, 30-something years later, I'm back, or almost 30 years later, I'm back here in a very different context. And she had said, oh, well, I've been there. I've been to the Rialto. I don't remember what film I saw. So I told her my story, and she said, oh, my God, that's the film I saw. I had sex in that theater. And I went, oh, my God, you got to come to the show. So it's a full circle moment for more than just me this evening, apparently. Welcome to the Rialto. Thank you. Good night. Imagine I just walked off. No. So before I really get into it, I want to explain, I want to talk to you about the concept of risk. Risk in my life, and especially over the past 10 years in my career, I've become very familiar with risk And as a result, I've become not so familiar, or I've maintained a healthy distance away from fear. I first got the inclination to do this, to do this show, I'd say in August of this year. And I just had this nudge, if you will, this like intuitive nudge saying, you should do what you do, but take it out of the yoga environment. Take it to a theater, take it to somewhere where you don't have to be a yoga person to show up. And only because I believe that what I do in my lifetime, you know, yoga is the art form and meditation is the art form through which I get across what I want. Well, it's not what I want people to know, it's what I believe people need to hear. And so I had the idea to, you know, take it out and potentially do it in the theater, and immediately that voice of doubt said to me, who the hell do you think you are, really? You don't know how to do that. So I sort of relegated it to like the back of my mind. And cut to me going to see a show with another friend of mine who's, I think, in the room as well. We went to go see a concert, and I was looking at the performer up on stage, and, you know, in my mind, this voice was saying, you're supposed to be there. You're supposed to be doing that. And I started to take it a little bit more seriously, but I didn't do anything about it. I didn't do any research on theaters or anything like that. So cut to Greece. I go to Greece to give the yoga trip that I give every September. And I start off the trip by saying to people that I am aware that that they have taken a risk in coming on this trip. And for some of them, the risk is a financial one. Just to put that kind of money aside and to be able to still keep everything running, that's a risk for some people. For other people, it was a risk to be away from their kids in September when they were going back to school. For other people, it was a risk to travel to the other part of the world and to travel as a solo traveler. You know, already we become vulnerable when we travel, and so that just sort of exacerbated it for some of them. For one person, she had never met me. She came from the other side of Canada. She had never met me, so she didn't know who I was. She didn't know, I guess, if we would get along. And then for, I guess, everyone, you know, not everyone knew each other, and at a certain point, I guess, it must have crossed their minds that they were going to be in community with people they didn't know for 10 days, and that may have freaked them out a little bit. So I said that at the beginning. At the end of the trip, I am seeing their faces, and I'm seeing that these people they're transformed. I mean, if you've ever been to the Greek islands and you didn't go there to, you know, poison your body, then you understand that to me, it's as close to heaven as possible. It's oversaturation of the senses, and I'm not trying to sell it. I'm just saying. So at the end of the trip, I'm seeing these people changed, and I'm seeing the community that we've built, and I said to them, I want you to really take this in, feel it, know it, recognize it, and understand that this is a result of you having taken a risk. You took a risk. This is the payoff, and hopefully in the future you will be able to take more. Maybe you'll be more apt to take risks, measured risks. Obviously, you don't want to hurt yourself, but risks. Because for me, there is no glory without a risk. And risk for me is simply moving beyond my comfort levels. It's beyond that voice of doubt that keeps me in a place where I shouldn't. And so I speak to them about this. It's one of the last classes that we had on the trip. And all of a sudden, I go back to my room and I'm dropping my stuff off. And I thought, my God, I'm such a hypocrite. I'm such a hypocrite because I'm telling them, good on you, well done for taking the risk. And meanwhile, I've got this thing that's brewing and I'm not doing anything about it. So that day, I went online and I did research, and I saw that this place could be rented out. And I thought, oh my God, how perfect. I get to tell that story, for starters. And it's, for me, it's a full circle moment. And so that's what I did. I came home, and I within 2 days, I had this place booked and had, the poster being made and all that stuff. And I think what I'm trying to get across is that I believe that we're all supposed to be living life at a level that we're not encouraged to live at. I think our culture elevates mediocrity. I think our culture elevates do what you need to do to make enough money to pay your way and pay your taxes, and just hope that you don't hate your life. And I reject that completely. It's why I give the retreats, and it's why I do all of it. It's why I write the books, and it's why I give the workshops. I'm very clear that it's ironic because I'm the one standing on the stage, but this has nothing to do with me. I know that what I do in the world has nothing to do with me. It has to do with everybody else. It has to do with potentially being the light bearer that helps sort of guide the way forward for people who are having a dark moment, because we all have dark moments. And so hopefully through my example, there is something that is inspiring you in the room and the people. I mean, my God, I've gotten so many messages today from all around the world, and I know that sounds insane, but it's true, just wishing me well. I wish I could be there. I want people to understand what my narrative is, to be able to compare narratives and potentially find parallels and similarities and be inspired to live bigger and to live stronger and to wake up every single day excited to see what the day is going to bring, as opposed to thinking, oh, I got to go to work, that kind of thing. So basically, my intention with this show is to do what I do, obviously outside of a yoga environment, and potentially be able to reach people who wouldn't throw on a pair of Lululemon pants. My intention with this show is to share my experience, to speak to you very personally and very practically, and potentially allow you to find parallels between our experiences. And listen, the symptoms are different, but the root causes are the same. There is fear, there is suffering, that's in every one of our lives. And so I want to be able to share what my story is. And at the end of the day, it really is just a story. I believe that through what I study and what I do in the world, I am getting closer and closer and closer to like my greatest human potential. I really believe that. I know that sounds a little Tony Robbins-ish, and I apologize, but it's what I'm noticing in my life. No one told me that life could be like this. No one told me that life could be this grand and this full of all the good feels. And I don't believe that my example is meant to be kept to myself. I don't believe that our stories are meant to be kept to ourselves. I believe that we are supposed to be sharing it. And not just what you had for dinner. We're supposed to be sharing all of it. Because that's where we find connection. And we live in a moment that is more divisive than ever, only because we're more aware of what is going on around the world that would divide us. Our culture would have us be divided. Our culture would tell us to pay attention to skin color, to pay attention to the language we speak, to pay attention to age, demographics, sexual orientation, all of that. And I reject all of it. And I'm going to explain to you this evening why. My intention as well this evening is to make you laugh. I've got some incredibly personal stories that I'm going to be sharing that I think are hysterical. I'm going to be sharing stories about my family, and I come from a family that has really, I think, the greatest sense of humor ever. And if you know me and you think that I've got a good sense of humor, then you know where I got it, because the apple does not fall far from the tree. I want to speak to you about why what you believe to be true is so vitally important. I want to speak to you about how you are in relation with your thoughts is going to dictate the quality of your experience of life. And I want to talk to you about why finding meaning among the seemingly innocuous or literal events is essential in understanding all of the reasons why we're here, what we're doing, so on and so forth. I want to talk to you about who I was as a child and who I am now and how far I've come, because when I look back on it, and I don't really look back very often, but for the sake of this show, I thought I should, because it is dramatic. When I look in hindsight, when I look back at my story, it is a story that needs to be told, because as a kid, there was a lot of fear. I was very up here in my head. And for all intents and purposes, I had an incredible childhood. I come from a loving family. I come from an emotionally intelligent family. But I grew up really formatively in the 80s as a gay kid who didn't see myself reflected back from the world around me, from my immediate world and from the world around me. And that can be incredibly traumatic as a kid. It was, for me, incredibly traumatic, because we all want to see ourselves reflected back, and I didn't. All I saw was obviously heterosexual couples, and before anybody said anything to me, I immediately gleaned that there was something wrong with me, that there was a secret that I had, a problem. That's how I remember speaking to my mom about it, and that I was stuck with it, that this was the cross I was going to have to carry for my life. And I know that it was a very different time from where we are now, but nonetheless, there are still areas in the world where it is a thing. And I'm blessed, and I don't like that word because it's a hashtag and people vomit it around, but I am blessed to have been born into this part of the world. and to be able to build my life in this part of the world, that's a pure accident, and I'll talk about that in a bit. I didn't see myself reflected back from my culture or my world around me until I started to tune into media a little bit. And in the 80s, first of all, it was the birth of HIV/AIDS, and that scared the hell out of me. And I also saw homosexuality reflected back to me through shows like Three's Company. So Three's Company, for those of you who remember, it was a story of this guy, a straight guy, who needed a room, and there were these two girls who he could live with. They could be roommates, but the landlord wouldn't let him live there as a straight man living with two straight women. And so he played gay. He pretended he was gay in order to be able to live with them. And the jokes that were made about him were, I mean, listen, they were funny, but from my point of view, I watched that and I thought, well, if they're saying that about him, then they're talking about me. And so I started to build my sense of identification or identity on that, thinking, well, that's me. I'm not seeing it reflected any other way. That's me, and I'm screwed, and this is it. And I'm talking 6. I was young. It was intense. It was intense to be up here. Cut to me being in England a couple of years ago. So some of my closest friends live in England. My godson is in England. His brother is in England, his younger brother. And one day I was going upstairs to my room to get something from my suitcase, and from my godson's younger brother, Freddie, he was walking with me. And we're walking up the stairs, and he says to me, Bram, are you married? And I said, yes. And he said, who are you married to? And I said, Uncle Stefan. And he said, so you're gay? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, do you kiss him on the mouth? And I said, yeah, sometimes. And he goes, oh, you're proper gay. And I looked at this kid, I was like, oh my God. And then I looked at him and he went, free people, man. He just said that, and I thought, how far we have come. And maybe that's an indication of, my friends and how they are in the world. But all I know is that when he said that, I just thought, if you would have told the 6-year-old me that would have happened, it would have changed a lot for me in my life. As a kid, I was what is referred to as a high reactive. Psychological tests have been done on infants to basically put them on whatever scale they have for low reactives to high reactives. And I was a high reactive baby. My mother told me that before I could even, I guess my first summer, she put me in the grass. She brought me outside in summertime and put me on the grass, and I immediately sort of shirked away from the sun. And any of you who have been with me to Greece or Croatia or anywhere know that this goes full Chernobyl when it gets in the sun. I need to be very, very protected. But it was more than just that. It was more than just exposure to the sun. I was a high reactive kid, which means, and also an introvert. So basically what that means is I was just aware of the most insignificant stimulus going on around me, and it would pull me off balance. And to a certain extent, I'm still that high reactive. I have developed a lot of defense mechanisms throughout my life, and I have a lot of studies and a lot of work that I've done up here and that I continue to do up here. But nonetheless, I was a high reactive kid. And to be a smart kid, introspective, and high reactive, oof, it was intense. It was heavy. Noel Fielding, who's a British entertainer, he had said that, you've got to be pretty strong to be gay in the world. And it's ironic because if I would have heard that as a kid, I would have thought, yeah, you would have to be strong. But as an adult, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with this is who I am. This is what it's going to be. If you don't like it, that's not my problem. I've come a long way, a very long way. However, as I was starting to work my way into adolescence, I remember, again, this is like 85. I remember going to the doctor with my mom and being aware, this was like when AIDS was really coming out, and Rock Hudson had it, and he was dying, or he had died. And I remember being in the doctor's office with my mom, and I didn't know how you got it. I just thought if you were gay, you got it. And so I remember being in the doctor's office, and my mom was standing there, and the doctor was like doing the throat swab and, checking my ears. And it wasn't that I was afraid. I knew that after it was all said and done, he was going to turn to my mother and say, your son is gay and he's dying. 12. Scared the shit out of me. And obviously I learned, and I got out of it. But all this to say that my childhood, there was a lot of suffering going on. There was a lot of suffering going on. And I'm a deeply, deeply spiritual person now. I wasn't as a kid. And I didn't understand what that meant as a kid. However, I was introduced to spirituality very young. I remember my babysitter. My brothers and I had these two sisters who babysat for us, and one of them, she was 17, she died in a car accident. And the day that it happened, a friend of hers came to our house to tell my mom, and I was in bed, and I remember my mom came to tell me, and I was gutted. I was totally, totally devastated. I had never felt anything like that before. And actually, a couple of days ago, as I was sort of prepping for this, I was alone at my place, and I sort of just closed my eyes and went back to that moment, and I could still feel it. I could still feel that, and I'd never felt grief before, but it was like, it was deep, and I could still feel it if I tried and channel it. So I remember falling asleep. That evening I fell asleep, and I dreamed that we were at the bakery that she always brought us to. So she would bring us to this neighborhood bakery where you could buy jellies and candies, 5 cents, 10 cents each. And I was dreaming that I was in front of the glass counter where you could see through and you could look at all the candy. And I looked over at her and I said, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I'm going to get. And I looked back at the glass counter. I'm deciding, and then I looked back to look at her, and she was gone. But there was a rose on the table. And I remember I woke up, bawling my eyes out, but I knew she was okay. I knew she was okay. This has happened for me with almost everyone who I've been close to who has passed away in my life, throughout my life. It happened with my grandparents, each of them. It happened with my teacher, Joan, who passed away last year, who, oddly enough, in my dream, I wanted to say to her, oh my God, I can't believe it's you. And she did this, and she just went up to a speaker, and she pointed, listen. And I swear to God, I've been so afraid to go up to a speaker to listen to it. I haven't done it. I will. I thought maybe I was going to come out today and maybe just listen to that speaker, but it's just going to be my voice. Maybe that's what she wanted me to know. Who knows? My friend Chantal, who died in 9/11, she came to me in a dream. She came much, much later. But she came to me in a dream where I was at a party and I was speaking with a bunch of people. She was one of those people. And all of a sudden, I clued into it being her, and I started bawling my eyes out, and I said, I can't believe it's you, I can't believe it's you. And she took my face in her hands, and she said, I'm fine. And she said, I'm fine. And then she came back a couple of months ago to ask me if I had been okay the night that everything went down. And I said to her, no, I wasn't okay the night that it went down. I wasn't okay for months after it because something happened, and I just got obsessed with it. And I had also been there 3 weeks earlier in the towers on the roof. And so I had a frame of reference to gauge it all. And when I woke up from that dream, I realized that, I had been sitting for years hoping that she hadn't been in too much pain when that all went down. And then she shows up in a dream making sure that I'm okay. And I don't know, I didn't answer her in the dream. I woke up before it was over because I was so surprised that it was happening again. But I hope she hears me tonight. I hope she somehow gets this. That was really the awakening of spirituality for me. Having this keep reoccur in my life with the people who have passed away, it really taught me that this is just meat and bones. And the first spiritual teaching that I have learned is that you're not your body. And so if you're not your body, what are you? And we'll get into that. A philosophy that is really attributed to a lot of Eastern religions, Eastern philosophies, a concept that is attributed to them, is a concept of suffering. That the human experience is an experience of suffering. That there are a lot of things that are going to happen in a lifetime that are going to pull us down, that are going to bring us into a place that we would rather not be in. And I sort of lived that as a kid. And I really believe that I put my time in. I'm trying really hard not to curse this evening because I know that there are children in attendance. I've done my time. And that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be other moments of suffering. Of course there will be, because, you know, that's a human existence. But I've done my time. And a lot of those philosophies believe that if you are able to somehow transcend that suffering, then you attain what is thrown around, the word that's thrown around is enlightenment. You attain enlightenment through transcendence of the human experience. The human experience is largely made up of suffering. If you can transcend your suffering, you can, you know, you win, for lack of a better term. I don't like the term enlightenment because it's really used as sort of like a dangling carrot, like keep running, keep running. For me, enlightenment is sitting here and seeing this. This is happening. Life is happening. It's being able to see my niece right there. Hi. It's knowing that my nephew, oh yeah, one of my nephews, and I think another one is orbiting somewhere. It's being able to go outside and breathe fresh air. It's being able to, listen, enlightenment is now. It's now. And what you do up here, that's going to dictate whether or not you live it. And it's not an abstract concept, and you don't have to wear an orange robe and be breathing through your third eye or any of that bullshit. It's about tapping into the beauty that exists in life right now. Right now. In the midst of all the other stuff, in the midst of the physical pain, in the midst of the diagnoses, in the midst of looking in the mirror and kicking the shit out of ourselves and thinking that's wrong. In the midst of getting all of the app notifications telling us about how everything is wrong. In the midst of, you know, financial issues, in the midst of all of it, that stuff is. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It has to be. It's part of a human existence. But it's not all that there is. And so for me, the process of getting to a place where I could wake up every morning and think, I can't wait to see what today is going to be, that was about transcendence. For me, that is transcendence of suffering. It is understanding that it will happen. I will deal with it when it happens, but I will, as often as possible, default to the positive. As often as possible. And when I say that, I mean at the end of, like, I don't know, if I watch a show that's really sort of chaotic, I'll end the show and then focus on something that brings me the good feels. At the end of the day, before I go to bed, good feels. I will always default to the positive at the end of any cycle, because for me, that reminds me that it exists. I understand what my role in the world is. My experience of life is an example. I know that I am here. I know that what you know as Bram is here to accompany other people through their moments of suffering. And to pass on tools that have worked for me so that they can work for them, some of you. And all of a sudden, we're not being held hostage by the darker moments. I know that my role in the world is to break the cycle of betrayal and mistrust that most people have in their lives. And that's a cycle of constantly getting hurt, constantly getting lied to, constantly getting broken up with, constantly getting cheated on, constantly not getting what they want, that kind of thing. So I'm the person in the world, and this is a responsibility that I take on myself. Nobody ever told me this, but it is my responsibility to be the person that other people can trust. Not only to be there, don't phone me in the middle of the night because my phone is off, but I'll be there, but sort of. To be there, but also to be able to provide the tools that really, really, really work. And this is not a situation where I'm trying to create a dependency, where I want people to come to see me every week. I'm passing on the tools that will work forever. They will work for a lifetime. That's my role. My role in the world is to be the person who I wished I had access to as a kid. And not necessarily for just sexuality issues, for any issue that leaves anybody feeling like they are other, that they're not good enough, that they're not included, that they're not welcome. And in many cases, that starts up here. It doesn't start with somebody else telling us. It's an assumption. Mine was an assumption. My suffering as a kid, pure assumption, based on the fact that I'm a pretty intuitive person. I was back then, and that's what I was gleaning from the world around me. So I understand that that's why I'm here. I also understand that I'm here to talk about my experience so that other people can find parallels, so that you can find parallels. The yoga teachings tell us that with all of this work, with all these tools that we learn, with all of these things that we can apply, we're going to get it right sometimes, and we're not going to get it. We're going to have, you know, moments where we're fully in it, and we remember, and we get it right, and oh, I'm so enlightened, and all that crap. And then there are going to be moments where we're in traffic, where we're trying to get here for 7:30 p.m., where we look in the mirror and feel badly about ourselves, where money is an issue, where our kids are driving us crazy, where we are driving ourselves crazy. And we're going to have very human moments. We're going to show up with emotional reaction, and that's okay. I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to peddle a way to for you to change your behavior and to never go back to that person. You are that person. We are those people. And that's not an accident. It's a blessing. All of the shadow, all of the stuff that we look at and we think, oh, I'm not really proud of that, welcome that shit. Accept it. Because it's what makes you you. It doesn't mean that you let it run rampant, but it means that you understand it is part of your equation. And it needs to be. There is no fully formed human being on earth who doesn't have a weak moment. Look at the Dalai Lama. I mean, the most refreshing thing about the Dalai Lama is he talks about these things. He talks about the fact that, yeah, we're human beings. We're going to have human moments. For me, it is about looking and observing at my own human moments and asking myself, can I make these little corrections? Where I believe I need to make them. Not where somebody else has told me, where I believe I need to make them. Because I'm very clear on the fact that I am supposed to show up in a certain way in the world. I did a lecture years ago for Wanderlust, and I called it Echoes, What Remains of Us. And for me, the concept of echoes, it's a term that I coined. But, you know, my echo is the energy that I leave trailing behind me in my wake. It is the energy that you are filled with when you think of me, when you see my name or whatever. And I'm responsible for that. Only me. So I'm responsible for that in how I speak to people. I'm responsible for that in the expressions on my face when people are talking to me. I'm responsible for that in every single social media post ever, which is a controversial thing to say because right now a lot of people are just shifting tension on social media. They object to an article they read. They post the article. Did you see this? It's insane. I get it. You're also perpetuating the energy of that article, whatever you're objecting to. And for a high reactive, social media is a problem for me. So I want my echo, I want to be remembered as someone who contributed. I want to be remembered as someone who tried to make the world a better place, or at least better than when I found it. That kind of thing. And I understand that that is my role in the world. I believe that, and listen, I'm going to get it right, and I'm not going to get it right. I'm going to have moments where I screw it up so badly, and, you know, if I'm forgiven by other people. I will forgive myself. And that's ultimately what matters at the end of the day. Now, I believe that life exists almost on two planes. There is the human existence, the literal existence, and there is the spiritual, symbolic, energetic existence. And you can call it whatever you want. And by the way, I'm not asking you to like jump on board with me. This is not one of those. I'm just explaining to you what my take on life is and why it's working for me. The human experience is the literal experience. It is the experience of everything that is first degree. Your name, your gender, your height, your weight, your job, your responsibilities, everything like that would be written about you. If there was a story being written about you or an article being written about you, that would be your human experience. And actually, you know, I'm often referred to yoga teacher Bram Levinson. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't see myself as that. Yoga is the art form through which I get across this stuff, because I talk about this stuff in everything that I do. Meditation as well. If I could sing, trust me, this would not be a spoken word evening. And trust me, you don't want to hear me sing. My older brother, I spent my entire childhood humming. I still do it. Poor Stefan. But it drove my older brother crazy. And I still do it. I still hum all the time. I've always got a song in my head. The human experience is largely what the selfishness of the ego reacts to. And so the selfish, and by the way, ego is not a bad thing. In spiritual circles, you're going to hear, oh, destroy the ego. Listen, you destroy the ego, you're dead. The ego, partially, the ego is responsible for us falling in love. It's responsible for us looking at this theater and thinking, what a work of art. At looking at work of art, or works of art, and being inspired by what we see. But the selfishness of the ego is that aspect of it that constantly wants more. We want more adulation. We want more money. We want more of the good stuff. And listen, as someone, I live a comfortable life. I'm by no means monetarily or financially wealthy, but I know a lot of people who are. I've had a lot of students who have more money than they'll ever need, and their lives have been crumbling down around them. And they have said to me, I remember having a conversation with one student about 4 or 5 years ago who just said to me, it means nothing. All of this stuff is just stuff. If I don't have someone to share it with at the end of the day, if I don't have joy in my life, it's just stuff. And in fact, it doesn't help. It actually makes it worse. I'll let you know if that's true when I get there. The human experience is sort of like the series of small pictures. It's like I got up at this time and I went to work and I got this in on time and I got back to work at this time and I ate this for lunch and I have to think about dinner and I've got a cold and I've got to manage that. That's the literal human experience. The spiritual experience is the roaring undercurrent of meaning that informs it all. And so what that means is that there is a meaning behind the literal events. That the literal events are not random. That potentially there is a reason for them occurring. And right there, we start to find purpose. Not necessarily our own purpose, but we start to realize that, well, listen, our culture would have us believe, with all of the ways that it is asking us to live up to the human experience, our culture would have us believe that it's all up to us. It's all up to me. I will make or break my own success or failure. And while work is essential, the Hindu scriptures are very, very specific that, yeah, you got to work. You have to work. You got to do your part. But if you do your part, and if you do it honorably, and if you do it in the spirit of generosity, things will start to unfold for you that you could never have predicted and that are going to blow you away. And that is what my life is. Listen, took a massive risk in doing this evening. I thought it was going to be me, Laurent, the tech guy in the back. Honest to God, I don't take any of this for granted. I don't assume that people are going to show up to the stuff. I'm not even aware of how I'm seen in the world. And that typically has to do with the fact that I can get very lost in here. I went to go see my osteo last week, and I had a little bit of a sore throat, and I just wanted to make sure. I had an appointment with her anyway, and I saw her, and I said, look, I'm going to get some cultures done. I just need to make sure it's not anything serious. And she inspected me, and she said, you are in a straitjacket. I said, what do you mean? She said, you're in a straitjacket. All the muscles of your upper body are in a straitjacket. You have not been breathing. You have not been moving. And I said to her, I'm sorry, what? She said, you have not been breathing. And I looked at her and I said, you tell me anything, but you don't tell me that. Because I'm spending every day of every week telling other people to inhale deeply up into their thoracic cavity. Hashtag hypocrite. That's what I should have called this show. Hashtag hypocrite. Next time. I am very guilty of doing this. And honestly, the stuff that I have learned and the stuff I'm talking about this evening is the stuff that has saved my life. I never expected to live this long. I know that's a kind of a morbid thing to say, but I didn't. And I'm still here. Blows my mind. The spiritual experience is the meaning that informs all of it. And the spiritual experience is begging us to ask this question. When things start to go, quote unquote, wrong, when we get those diagnoses, when we're not feeling great about ourselves, when any of that shadow stuff starts to, rear its ugly head, we are meant to ask this question: what am I meant to learn? If you know how to ask that question when shit goes down, then you are starting to tap into what exists simultaneously with the human experience. Instead of feeling like you're being held hostage by events, this gives you the ability to feel like you can actually understand it and respond to it. So a year ago exactly, my partner got a diagnosis of, he had a spot on his leg. And he had been told, oh, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. It turned out to be something. It turned out to be cancerous, and he went through what he needed to go through to take care of it. But I will be very honest when I say that terror landed in our household. Pure terror, fear. And not necessarily from him. It was in me. It was about, what does my future look like? What does his future look like? I don't want him to suffer. And I just don't want this. I don't want this. And when it started to come up, there were a couple of days of shock, and that's normal. And I don't think you can really do much with shock except let it pass. And then what came up was, okay, what am I meant to learn from this? What am I meant to learn? And all of a sudden, it was like a massive epiphany went off in my brain. I realized that I didn't need to be held hostage by this. I had a choice as to how I responded to it. Not reacted to it, responded to it. And all of a sudden, I was talking about it in my classes. I was talking about it with people. I was talking about it with him. And what did I learn from it? Number one, anything can happen to anyone at any time. And that was something I learned from my friend who died in 9/11. What did I learn from it? I learned to not take him for granted and to potentially treat him a little bit better, because we always hurt the ones we love. A little bit. The spiritual experience, when you start asking that question, it starts to guide you down what I call like the spiritual highway. And that is where we get closer and closer to finding meaning in life, in the world, and not just in the collective narrative, but in our own personal narratives. And it actually starts to explain that there is another narrative. It's not just the human experience going on. This is not just about, if I look at this evening through a human experience lens, I'm back 30 years later, you're here, we're in the room together, we'll break in a little bit and go back to our lives, and that'll be it. Seen through a spiritual experience, that guy got me high and brought me somewhere that was going to matter to me. 30 years later, it would matter to me. I'm never going to forget this evening. And the fact that I could do it, that this place is still here, it's still here, that kind of thing. The spiritual experience is largely predicated on the concept, which is an Eastern philosophy, that if you're not your body, then what are you? If I am not my body, what am I? Hinduism, Buddhism, a lot of Eastern religions and philosophies tell us that we are the energy in the body. And when you start to go into Hindu and yogic scripture, you see a couple of terms being thrown around, like the witness or the observer. And that speaks to the energy in every single one of our bodies. And when you think about it, and think about it purely rationally, every single one of us has this body that without the energy in it, this is just meat and bones. It is the energy that animates it. It is the energy that gives the personality. It is the energy that motivates us in specific directions. And it's going to do that with these little intuitive nudges, like you should do what you do, but outside of the yoga environment. Mind blown. When you study this energy is said to be made up of three things. It's said to be, the energy in the body has the capacity to love, it has the capacity to be compassionate, and it is made up of something called discriminative wisdom. Discriminative wisdom basically means that no matter what that energy encounters in its travels, no matter what you encounter in your travels, you're going to be able to handle. The energy in the body can handle whatever it encounters. If I had been told this as a kid, and I'm not saying my parents did anything wrong, this is not anything within the realm of anything that they would have been exposed to. However, if I would have known this as a kid, my life, my infancy, my childhood, my adolescence would have been monumentally different. Because and I'm not saying that you've got to believe this, but if you can start to look at things from that perspective, all of a sudden there's very little room for fear in the equation. If we can handle whatever we encounter, then what's there to be afraid of? If I would have been stuck in the human experience about this whole thing, I never would have rented this. But because I trusted that intuitive nudge that was directing me in a specific direction, we're here this evening. And that is absolutely because of that. I've been told how courageous I am to do this, and it has nothing to do with courage. It has absolutely nothing to do with courage. It has everything to do with I know exactly where I am on my spiritual development, and I have learned to trust that intuitive nudge, because that intuitive nudge is what had me write books, and it's what had me start to give these trips around the world, and it's what had me start the mentoring program. All of the things, all of the ways that I show up in the world started up here. Sometimes in dreams through a voice actually speaking to me. I'm not going to get into that. That's another show. But nonetheless, I pay attention to it. I understand that it's not for nothing. And what I really want to convey to you this evening is that the dreams that you have, the hopes that you have, the goals that you have, those aren't accidents. Not everybody has them. Growing up, I grew up in a household where I just sort of figured everybody lives the way I live. This is the way everybody lives. And then I started meeting people and seeing, no, that's not it. Their families are not the same. The houses are not the same, that kind of thing. Just because you have a goal or a dream to accomplish something or to be something in the world doesn't mean that everybody else has it. That is specific to you. It has everything to do with what Hinduism calls dharma, your dharma. Now, dharma, translated from Sanskrit to English, means that it insinuates that there is something from beneath that rises from beneath to support you. It is your pillar of support. It's your raison d'être. If the energy has landed in these bodies at this time, in these bodies, in this geographical location, with all of the resources that are available to us, there's a reason for it. And the concept of dharma tells us that every single one of us has an energy in the body that is here now to accomplish something. Now, so for some of us, it's going to be to have our kids and to raise them and to show them what love is. For some of us, it is going to be to help guide other people through darkness. For some of us, it's going to be to sing, to dance, to do whatever. And what's incredible for me to watch my niece and my nephews grow up is to see them being given the freedom to choose their path. I mean, I always had that freedom, but I always felt a lot of pressure from the world around me because in my mind, I had taught myself to believe that that was more important than asking myself what I wanted. Because I didn't think that I had a choice. I didn't think that happiness was a thing for me in my lifetime. I know that my dharma is what I told you. I'm here to guide people. I'm here to help them through their bumps, over their bumps, and to be there when they go through more bumps, that kind of thing. But the spiritual experience, this dharmic thing, has everything also to do with what Joseph Campbell calls the accidents of life. Now, Joseph Campbell was a comparative mythologist, and what he did was he studied cultures and religions throughout the world, and he extracted their mythologies, and from what he extracted, he found threads of commonality. He found very similar things in the mythologies that he was studying, and he compiled them into what he referred to as the hero's journey. Now, to put this into context, the hero's journey is a narrative that informs much of what you see in Hollywood. The hero's journey is the journey of one person, one protagonist who is in search of something. Well, for starters, they're just in their world. They don't know. And then they wake up to something, and all of a sudden they feel like they need to go in a certain direction. They realize they want to seek something. And in Hollywood, in mythology as well, that something ends up being something like a sword or a ring or the Force or a grail, that kind of thing. So the hero's journey really informs all of these things, but the hero's journey is what every single one of us is living out every single day. Every single one of us is on some stage of the hero's journey. The stages of the hero's journey, I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but I mean the ordinary world. The first stage is the ordinary world. We live in the world we live in. It is what it is. Great. And then there's the call to adventure. You wake up and realize that you are in pursuit of something, and you didn't know you were in pursuit of it, but now it is the only thing that you want for your lifetime. And then there's refusal of the call. I mean, if you look at it, if you micro look at it in the whole process of me coming up with this evening, my call to adventure was, okay, do this thing. Rent this theater, do this thing. And then there was refusal of the call within about 15 seconds. And then there are dragons to slay, that kind of thing, spiders to kill, passages to traverse. And there will be tests and there will be trials. But ultimately, if you stay focused and if you keep going forward and if you just never take no for an answer and you don't stop, because that's what I believe separates people who get what they want from people who don't, those who give up, you get what you were in search of. And then part of the hero's journey is you get it, and then you bring it back. You bring it back. You come back to where you started. You bring the reward back. And what no one tells you about the hero's journey is that once you've gotten what you were seeking and once you come back home to your people. By the way, how's the glare off my forehead? Is it all right? I'm going to try. Sorry. I'm going to try not to get too distracted by this, but today it did hit me that, oh, maybe you might need makeup. By the way, I manage myself. I am my accountant. I am my PR person. And all of a sudden today I was like, oh, do I need to be my makeup person too? And then I went to MAC, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll buy a powder or something, because whenever I do TV, they powder me. I went to MAC, and I looked at the prices of that shit. Oh, no. I was like, they're getting full glare tonight. I'm not spending $40 to baby powder my head. That's just not happening. And then I spoke to one of you, I think I saw you down there, who said to me, I was speaking to someone on the phone, and she said, she said, go to Farmer Pre and go up to the makeup counter and tell them that you're doing a show in a couple of days and you just need them to do your makeup to see if it works for you. And if I would have had more time, might have, but I didn't. Full glare. So if I'm blinding you, I apologize. The hero's journey, the accidents of life. He talks about, Joseph Campbell tells us that every single one of us is on this journey. And that ultimately, when we come back with what we set out to seek, we are of service. We are of service to each other. We come back with this thing, and all of a sudden, we are there for each other. It's not something we keep for ourselves. It's something that we are then providing for the rest of the world. One of the only things that our culture does not encourage us to do is take care of each other. We are bred to compete with each other. We are not bred to be collaborative, and yet the human energy in the body breeds on collaboration. It breeds on cooperation. Listen, what you believe to be true about the world around you is going to dictate the quality of that experience without a doubt. So, if on your hero's journey you are somebody who believes that we're screwed, generally we're screwed, the world is doom, it's gloom, nobody's ever going to find light, we're never going to be able to survive this, whatever, then go out into the world. Well, don't even go into the world, read the newspaper. You'll see that you're right. And if you are somebody who believes that we are stronger together and that light always battles darkness and that there is love and that there is hope and that there is all the stuff that we hope that there is, go to the arrivals section of the airport and watch people welcoming their loved ones home. And on a less heartwarming level, if you want to have your faith in humanity restored, look at what happens to the people who have survived man-made or natural disasters, terror attacks, earthquakes, that kind of thing, who are stuck under rubble with a hand stretching out from between the rocks. The people who help them don't stop to say to them, oh, I'm sorry, before I help you, can you just tell me what God you pray to? And they don't look at the color of the hand, and they're not asking how much money they have. They're not asking them who they sleep with. They are reaching out. That is our instinctual urge. Our instinctual urge is to be collaborative. It is not to be competitive, and yet our culture promotes competition. Get ahead of the next person. Be afraid of people who need freedom and may potentially be coming to this country, and be afraid of the fact that they're now integrated because there's not enough to go around. Well, I disagree. There is enough to go around. There will always be enough to go around. Not only collectively in the world, but in a yoga community kind of place. I know a lot of people who work in this industry who they hang on to what they've built and they're so afraid to share it. Listen, that shit isn't right. You're going to suffer. The only person who suffers when you are holding on to something, afraid that other people are going to get a piece of it, is you. Other people don't care. They're going to find their way anyway. So this is really about understanding that what you believe to be true matters. Because we live in something that's referred to as a tension of opposites. If you've read Tuesdays with Morrie, that book changed my life. And if you don't know about the book, it's just about this reporter whose university professor is dying of ALS. And he sees a 60 Minutes show with his professor on ALS and Lou Gehrig's disease, and decides that he's going to fly to the state where his teacher lives every Tuesday, and he's going to sit with him, and he's going to speak with him, and he basically starts to interview him. And then he compiles it into this book, Tuesdays with Morrie. Morrie tells him that we live in something that's referred to as a tension of opposites. That we always live between two choices that we could be making, between good and evil, between light and dark, between you and me. There's always something that is dividing. And that ultimately the goal in life is to transcend that, to transcend the opposites, to focus on one thing and just be that one thing. Be kind, be loving, that kind of thing. This is a reason, by and large, for a lot of the tensions that we hold in our bodies. Because what goes on either around in the world around us or in our minds If it is a negative thought, if it is a negative thing we hear about, it's going to land in the body as a contraction or what we refer to as tension. And a lot of us, the human brain leans towards a negative bias by default, which means we focus on the negative before we focus on the positive. It also tends towards the extreme. It focuses on what's extreme versus what isn't. So by default, we are thinking about what is negative and what is extreme, and if we're not aware of it, that's all we're doing, which means that the body is riddled with tension. If you bring in the concept of the tension of opposites, okay, fine, that stuff exists. There's that darkness, but there's also light. And this is what is referred to, well, being able to make that jump cognitively from focusing on the negative to focusing on the positive is what yoga teachings from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras teach us as being in the presence of negative thoughts, think of opposite ones. This is a teaching from the Ashtanga Yoga system, apparently thousands of years old. I wasn't there, I don't know. But nonetheless, in the presence of negative thoughts, think of opposite ones. Now, in psychotherapeutic environments, worlds, industries, there's something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which has people who are trying to work through a moment think about that moment differently. Therapists will guide them to look at their situation through a different perspective. And in doing so, and the more often you do it, you start to create different brain channels. You start to actually think about things differently. And if the mind has only been focusing about on the negative, and you start to redirect it to the positive, or have someone help you redirect it to the positive, all of a sudden, your experience is completely different. They both coexist. Simultaneously, the good and the bad, it is all out there. What you focus on is up to you, if you're aware of it. The mind is one-pointed. It can only focus on one thing at a time. If you're not aware that it's focusing on the negative, it will only focus on the negative. If you are aware of all of this, then you can be present enough to stop and to observe that you're focusing on something that is eliciting sensations of tension in the body and say, okay, well, what's its opposite? Okay, that. And think about it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to believe the opposite. I'm saying that if there is a negative loop, thought loop, negative self-talk going on in the mind, that lands in the body as tension. If you go to the opposite and start to just think about those words, that has a different vibration. If I think, I'm screwed, life is doom and gloom, it's all misery, I feel, just saying it, I feel it here. If I think, there is beauty in the world, I'm going to be fine, everything's going to be fine, let's live and have fun and do as much as we can to enjoy this time, that lands differently. So it's not really about what you believe, it's about understanding that you are at the mercy of the sensations in the body. Now, before I get to sensations, Buddhism looks at what I just told you about in a little bit of a different way. They take a step even further back, and they say it doesn't matter what you're thinking about, it's about your mental state when you're thinking it. So Buddhism tells us that if you wake up in a bad mood, you can think about lollipops and unicorns and kittens and toilet paper commercials. It's not going to make a damn difference. Because you've got to work with the mental state first. If your mental state is anger, then you have to look at what the opposite of that mental state is. Acceptance, love, whatever. You call it whatever you want. But you start to go towards that, and you would be shocked at how quickly it happens. I did it a couple of days ago where I realized that I was a little bit nervous about doing this evening, which doesn't happen very often, but this is a first for me. And I was on my scooter, I was driving to a class, and all of a sudden I thought, you know what? Like, you can do this. You have the opportunity to do this. And people are responding. I was out of it. This is the creation of health. This is the creation of our own health, and it starts up here for every single one of us. It's not contingent on what is happening with the President of the United States. I'm being so good this evening. It's not contingent on the money that you have, and it's not contingent on your friends, and it's not contingent on any of that. It is contingent on what you do with your mind, because in the presence of negative thoughts, think of opposite ones. In the presence of negative mental states, shift it. In the presence of negative people, remove yourself. In the presence of negative environments, remove yourself. Unapologetically, you don't owe anybody an explanation. This is your experience. This is your life. And for me, it had everything to do with realizing, okay, well, I'm going to do it my way now. And it's paid off. we are looking for sensations. If I ask any one of you, let me just check the time. Oh, we're good. If I ask any one of you what you're looking for in your lifetime, most of you are going to say, oh, I'm looking for love, or I'm looking for acceptance, or I'm looking for joy, or I'm looking for peace, or I'm just looking for a night away from my children. Coming from somebody who doesn't have them, that's rich. But in fact, what we are actually looking for is sensation. We are looking for the sensations of peace, of connection, of love, of whatever you would come up with. That is why addicts will chase a high, and that's how people get addicted. And ultimately, what you do with your thoughts elicits those sensations. So all of a sudden, you don't need to anesthetize all of the bad feels with drugs or with alcohol or with money or with anything. You just need to work with your mind. You need to look at what you believe to be true, not only about the world around you, but about yourself. What you believe to be true about yourself is going to inform your self-esteem. And your self-esteem, you're doing everything at the level of your self-esteem. You're marrying at the level of your self-esteem. You are dating at that level. You are hanging out with people who treat you at that level, friends, whatever. You are eating at that level. You are sleeping at that level if you're doing either of them. What you believe to be true about the world, again, if you believe that everything is doom and gloom, you'll see it. And if you believe that everything is light, then you'll see that too. And by the way, you can believe that everything is doom and gloom, but work at not carrying that around in the body. Again, the creation of health. Because what gets filtered through this brain lands in here. And I'm not going to say that blood disorders and cancers and all that stuff are caused by by our thoughts, but I'm going to say they're partially. Yes, environmental factors absolutely factor in. But what is going on up here and how much tension we're carrying? I saw my osteo and I told her, she said to me, oh, you're in a straitjacket. And then she explained to me that the straitjacket was causing my sore throat. Now, this wasn't like I felt the muscles pulling. I had a sore throat. She showed me she showed me all the muscles are pulling at all the muscles here, and they're pulling it all to the side, and that manifests as a sore throat. Can you imagine what we walk around with every single day thinking, oh, I just feel like I'm a little bit run down? But it's actually due to the tension that we carry in the body. Now, I practice my yoga, I do my meditation, I do all these things, and sometimes it's the last thing I want to do. But I also know I don't want to walk around with a sore throat. So, and then ironically, Monday, this has been a very interesting experience leading up to this evening. Monday, I woke up and I had an actual full day off, which rarely happens. And I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go downtown. I didn't want to go to the gym, and I didn't want to sit and watch TV, and I didn't want to read. It was really odd, and then the power went out. And I thought, spiritual experience is serving my ass up to me like no one's business. The spiritual experience is like the path that we find ourselves on, like it or not. And to ask ourselves, well, why is this happening? Obviously, I needed to ground. The electricity was taken away from me, and I stayed home. And I practiced yoga, and I meditated, and I spent the day reading, and I took a nap. Mind blown. I think that you need to have a certain openness of imagination to be able to tap into spirituality and the spiritual realm. And I'm not talking like witches and incantations. I'm just talking about looking for or trusting that there is a reason for things occurring, that there is a deeper meaning in forming them. As a kid, because everything was so rough up here, I had this really vivid imagination. And it may have nothing to do with that. It may have to do with the fact that my mother also has a vivid imagination. Let me sit down for this. So, my mom, you could tell her a story, 5 words, it becomes a miniseries. If she tells it, it's a miniseries. And if you don't know if you're too young to understand what a miniseries is, it used to be on TV, and it was like a little movie over 3 nights. And I used to go to my uncle's place to watch movies. I used to sleep over at his place, and I know he's here. I remember we used to go to New England when I was a kid, and every summer we would go for a week or 2. And there was one summer we were in Gloucester, and there was apparently a man who had been swept away off the rocks, like the rocks that go out into the ocean. There was a guy who was swept away, and like we weren't there. We just heard about it when we got there. My mother telling the story, it was a stormy afternoon. I'm looking at her, I'm like, you weren't there. And she's like, it was a stormy afternoon. I was like, okay. What was it? The ocean was churning. The ocean was churning, and a wave came and took him and swept him away, and he was never seen again. And I was like, you should write. You should be a writer because this is gold. Then there was the time that we were in Cape Cod over a summer, and my parents had rented this house for 2 weeks, and the second we got there, there was a funky energy in that house. It was not, there was something not right. I don't know what happened there, but it wasn't good. And I remember from the second we got there, I was telling them, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here. Cut to the first night we're there, I get woken up because there's a gunshot. And I run upstairs to my parents' bedroom, and I'm like, there's been a gunshot. We need to get the F out of here. And my mother's like, go to sleep. It's fine. We'll deal with it in the morning. So the next morning, I'm so happy I get to tell you this. The next day, I'm in the kitchen with my mother, and my mother says, oh, I'm going to phone City Hall. I don't even know if there is a City Hall. I'm going to phone City Hall, and Mom, do you remember this? I know you remember this. She said, I'm going to phone City Hall, and I'm going to find out what went down, what it was. So I said, okay, great. And I'm sitting there in front of her. So she picks up the phone. And by the way, this is when the phone was in one place. It didn't follow you around the world. You had to go to the phone. So she goes to the phone, and it's like got the, like the cord. And she picks it up, and she pretends to dial a number. And I knew that she pretended to dial a number because she had that receiver so hard on her ear because I knew that in her ear, all she heard was, eh, 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 eh. You know what I'm talking about? So she, this is what I hear. Hello, this is Mrs. Levinson. We're staying at this house. My son said that he thought he heard something like a gunshot last night. Oh, a drag race. Oh, okay, so I totally get it, a tire. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, goodbye. And she hangs up. I'm sitting in front of her like this. I can see you. In the same room, I can see you. And she's like, it was a drag race and a tire burst. And I was like, we are going to die here. We're going to die in this house. We're going to die in this house. So I learned from the greats. And I was a kid of the 80s, right? I grew up in a decade where everything was exaggerated. Politically, everything was very to the right. There was a threat of nuclear war. And as a result, art sort of exploded. Hair exploded into big helmets. And if you couldn't do it naturally by like doing the back comb, you got chemicals to keep it, Makeup was provided by Seco and Color Your World. And it was just let's just roll it on. We had Tina Turner singing to us, we don't need another hero. We just need to find our way home. And she's dressed like the end of the world is happening. Cyndi Lauper is singing to us about masturbation. They say that you can go blind if you do it, but you probably should. Corey Hart was wearing sunglasses at night as the James Dean Rebel. I don't know what the hell that was about. I still don't know what that was about. And if you listen to the song, he tells you why. I still don't get it. I don't get it. Everybody wore shoulder pads. We were militarized. Everybody wore shoulder pads. So and then, of course, there's Madonna. I mean, I grew up obsessed with this woman, obsessed with Madonna, because this was somebody who, through the art that she projected into the world, was plastic. She wasn't real. She, the platinum blonde hair, the porcelain skin, all of it, it was so larger than life. It was superhero-ish. And then all of a sudden, you could go see her in concert. It was like fantasy bled into reality. And so I already have a tendency towards fantasy. It was my imagination that created this whole evening. And I think that every one of us should start to tap into that a little bit, into what we want. Not what is available, not what is offered, but what we want. And understand that no one can stand in our way better than we can. That we typically are the ones who prevent ourselves from going out there. When my teacher, Joan, who passed away last year, I started studying yoga with her in 1999, but I was really studying life with her, and she was the type of teacher who didn't tell you this was happening, but she just did it. I remember going to see her when things were getting funky in my life in my 20s, and I went for a mentoring session. I just sat down with her, and she heard me as I sort of just vomited all of my crazy. And she just looked at me and she said, you just have to get out of your own way. And I was like, that's not helpful. I don't know what that means, but it ain't helpful. I figured it out later in life, that I was the one who was allowing all of these things to be things. I was the one who was saying, that's going to be a problem, that's going to be a problem. All of these deaths that are happening around me, all these lives that are gone, that's going to be a problem. I hadn't fully actualized my spirituality to understand that energy doesn't die. The body goes, the energy that animates it does not. And I have no doubt about it. I'm not asking you to get on board. I'm just saying it doesn't. Because I know that my grandmother's echo, my mother's echo, the energy she left behind, is part of me. She is part of me. I am because she was, and she still is. We are all affected by the people who have been, because they still are. You know, when Bowie died and Prince died, I was lecturing to classes saying, we're never going to live in a world where they aren't. They always are. And that's the best expression or the best explanation of how energy outlasts us. So all this to say that you have to believe. You have to believe that anything is possible. You have to believe that even if there is a lot of darkness and a lot of fear, that it's not just your responsibility, it's the reason you're here to redirect the mind towards the opposite of fear, which is what? It's faith. And I'm not saying faith in a religious way. I'm saying have faith that it's all possible. Have faith that you can do anything. And really, one of the only reasons I'm doing this evening is to be an example of what can happen if you allow yourself to pay attention to the, oh, that could work, as opposed to, that'll never work. If I had paid attention to that'll never work, none of it would be happening. I'd be ringing up stuff behind a cache. In the presence of negative thoughts, think of opposite ones. I can also tell you that, by and large, the love that I have to give other people, and it's not, obviously it's not a physical love, it's like an immeasurable love. I want to hold space for other people. I want to help them heal so that they can continue on and get all the good stuff going. That comes from coming from a family that was loving and is loving, and I am blessed. I'm so fortunate to have my parents still here, and to have my brothers still here, and to have my family who is here this evening still here, and even the ones who are not. It's okay. We have survived the human experience with each other. We have survived. You know, we have forgiven. My family. There's been so much forgiveness in our lives. For me, I have forgiven my parents for moments like 10 years ago. I don't remember if it was my dad or my mom phoned me and said, do you want to go to Plattsburgh? And I was like, Plattsburgh? We used to go to Plattsburgh when I was a kid. It was so much fun. You went to the record store. You went to the bookstore. And then I realized once I said, yeah, let's go, and we went, that for them, Plattsburgh now is let's go to the Super Walmart. And if you don't know what Super Walmart is, it's a Walmart that is the size of a small country. So at that point, my mom was just shoving anything into the carriage that had 10 grams of carbs or less. It didn't matter if it was food, but it went into the carriage. And it was around Easter time. And we get to the checkout cash, and I can hear you. In the room, we're in the aisle paying, and in the aisle next to us is a woman who has a carriage full of chocolate, because it's Easter, chocolate bunnies. And my mother had started losing her hearing a little bit, so she didn't realize that she was yelling, and she went, look at that woman's basket. And I went, Mom, they are going to shoot your ass. We're in the States. They all have guns. They all have acid wash. They're going to shoot you. At which point she said, well, they don't call it Fatsburg for nothing. And I went, oh, my God. I thought, if there is a God, swallow this. Just swallow it up. I want to fall into the ground. I want to disappear. The first time Stefan came over for dinner, meeting my family, I'm sharing with you. The first time he came over for dinner, my parents had made ribs, and Stefan's not that much of he's not that much of a carnivore. So, they made ribs, and he sort of finished his plate, and my dad looked at him, and he went, you're not done. And if you know Stefan, he's very bashful. So he was like, what? And one of my brothers says, yeah, you got to put some head into it. And I was like, oh, my God. And then my other brother said, yeah, you got to go down on the bone. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I I didn't orchestrate this. I don't know what. It was almost like they had planned it without me knowing. I swear to God, I can't make this up. My parents, when they went away, when we were kids, they would go away, and in many cases, they left us with people. The human experience has been very real in my family. I remember there was a couple, I don't know where they found them. Honest to God, I don't even think I had never met them. My brothers and I had never met them. And my parents had said, do you want to go stay with your grandparents? I was like, no way in hell. They're like, okay, well, we're going to get people to come in. I was like, great. Cut to Homer Simpson in a tank top, smoking cigarettes, and his wife, who reminded me of the woman from All in the Family, if you remember that show. Edith Bunker, I think that was her name. I'm telling you, within 3 days, we were all over at our grandparents, I swear to God. Forgiven. They're forgiven. Let's talk about how they've forgiven me. So when I was 12, I wanted to get my ear pierced, and my mother said to me, if you pierce your ear, you're out of the house. And then they went away. And my mother said, if you pierce your ear while we're gone, you're out of that. I'm going to come home and you're gone. So they came home like 6 p.m. 2 weeks later, 10 days later, and I pretended I was asleep at 6 p.m. I was in bed. I got my ear pierced. I'm lying on the side where the earring is. I hear my mother walk into the room. There's no like, oh, are you sleeping? Roll over. So I roll over, and she looks at me, and she goes, she just walks out of the room. Forgiven. There was one night where my parents were going away, and my dad had contact lenses. And I was fascinated by contact lenses. I didn't know what they were, so I went to the bathroom one day, and I was sort of going through his contacts to like look at, and all of a sudden one of them fell. I was like, shit, I couldn't find it. For the life of me, I couldn't find it. And so I just left it. And then my parents started getting ready to go out, and my dad couldn't find his contact lens, and they blamed my younger brother, and they were like ripping him a new one, and I felt so badly that I came out and I said, it was me. They forgave me, rather. There was a neighbor who lived down the street who was friends with my parents, and my mom at a certain point had decided that my brothers and I didn't need to use our toys anymore. They were going to give them to the neighbor. And she packs them up in garbage bags, and it's summer, and I'm in the driveway in front of the house. I'm like playing basketball on my own, because that's a thing. And all of a sudden, my mom comes out, and she says, listen, here are the bags of toys. She's going to come pick them up. I'm leaving. I'm going to run some errands. You're going to be sort of locked out of the house, but just like keep playing. I'm going to be back in like 20 minutes. It's fine. And when she comes for the toys, just give her the toys. And I'm like, okay, great. So I keep playing. 3-4 minutes into it, I'm like, oh, God, I really have to pee. And then I think, okay, well, I can't go to the back of the house because if she shows up and I'm not here to give her the toys, not thinking, like she's obviously just going to look at the bag and think, okay, I'll take it. Then I thought, well, I can't go to the sides of the house because the neighbors are going to see me, and then, I'm going to implode. So I figured I'm going to go to right up to the top of the driveway to the street, and I'm going to look both ways. And if I don't see anybody, then I'm going to go down to the garage door, and I'm going to pee on the garage door and just get it over with. The logic of a 11-year-old. So I go up and I look both ways and no one's coming. And so I go down to the garage door and I'm wearing sweatpants. I need to put this into context. I'm wearing sweatpants, and with my left thumb, I unhook the sweatpants, and with my right hand, I pull out my junk and I start peeing. And all of a sudden I hear, Bram? So my reflex wasn't to stop peeing. Are you sitting? My reflex was to let go of the elasticated waistband, which hit my wiener, pointing up, which hit my stomach, and I kept peeing in my face. And as if that weren't bad enough, I was like, then I thought, oh, let's just turn around. Let's just turn around and have a full-on conversation. So I turned around, I was like, yes. And she looked at me. Her face was like, oh, my God. And she said, are those for me? And I went, mm-hmm. She was like, gone. Totally gone. My parents never spoke to me about it. I know they knew, and they must have heard. I mean, it's not like this woman was like, I'm not going to tell his parents. They never said anything to me. Forgiven. I've had car accidents in their cars before. I mean, there was once in New England where my dad was coming out of a shop, and my brother and I were in the back, and I think it was like a stick shift car, and my father was coming out of the shop, and I was so excited to see him that I waved, and then I thought it would be a good idea to just like take the car at a park, and the car started rolling away, and my father's running after, screaming. I mean, listen, my mother has got the best sense of humor in the world. My father doesn't take shit from anybody, and that to me has been so inspiring. I mean, there's a story where he was in a public bathroom, and he peed at the urinal, and as he's walking out, without washing his hands, somebody says to him, "Didn't your mother ever teach you to wash your hands?" And he said, "Well, my mother taught me not to piss on my hands." I thought, that's my dad. That's my dad right there. And so, in the spirit of forgiveness, I have something to fess up to that I've never spoken to my parents about. I know. So, when I was about 13 or 14, I taught myself to drive. My parents would go out with one of their cars, and I would find the keys to the other car, and I would take the car, and I would drive around the neighborhood and hope to God that the neighbors weren't seeing me, but I taught myself to drive. And one day I came home, and I parked the car in the garage, and the driveway sloped down, and I went upstairs, and I started watching the Golden Girls, as one does, and all of a sudden, the house shook. I felt this bang. And I looked out the window, and all I saw was the tail end of the car. And I thought, oh, shit. And I ran downstairs into the garage, and the car had come through the garage door. So I knew that my parents were with my uncle, who's here this evening, and I was trying to phone my uncle to say, do you know where my parents are? This has happened. And they came home, and my mother fully took the blame for it. She said, I must have left the car in reverse. I don't know how I did it. And I didn't say a thing. Until tonight. So, Mom, thank you for covering for me. I think that you knew what had happened, but you were just trying to, I think. If that's not the case, I apologize. Human experience. And on a spiritual level, I'm not here and they're not still here by accident. This was meant to, if I get hit by a bus at the end of, when I walk out of here, it's because I got that out of the way. All that to say that I come from a place of love, I come from a place of forgiveness, and I don't believe that that's an accident. I believe that I was born into this kind of family so that I could bring that vibration out into the world and make a difference. To work with my own suffering, to help people work with their suffering, and to be a light bearer, not just for them, but for myself. Because very often the stuff that I find myself talking about is the stuff that I need to hear. The carpenter's cabin is the one most crooked, that kind of thing. So, spiritually speaking, success is defined not by what you own and not by how much money you have and not like the stuff, but it's defined by what you've learned. And we only learn in moments of suffering. We don't learn in moments of everything's easy. We coast. We learn when things get tough. And the greatest tool that I could pass on to you is to ask when things get tough, what am I meant to learn, and to keep asking that question. So I think that I'm pretty wealthy on a spiritual level. And I think it's my responsibility to share with you what I've learned. I'll tell you what I've learned. Number one, I've learned how to how to be more welcoming to the moments that I don't want to happen. And to understand, to accept that it's happening, because that's a precursor to move through it and to change. And then to constantly start to look for the meaning. To not ask why, but to trust that there's a because, and to keep looking for the because. I have learned that it starts up here. I have learned that fear had way more of a hold on me than I wanted it to as a kid. And I have a say in how that goes now. I have learned that with no risk, there is no glory. I've learned that love feels better than hate to me. And I've learned that if I don't want to suffer, then I have to curb all of the negativity that is within me. Because the only one who suffers when I'm negative up here is me. It's not, I could be driving and cursing the person who's driving in front of me. And by the way, that's where my human experience kicks in, is when I'm driving. That person, they don't care. They don't know. It starts with me. I'm the one who suffers. And if I don't want to suffer, then I got to start working with this. What else have I learned? I've learned how to deprogram my initial response. My initial response typically can be emotional reaction. And I've learned how to observe that that's about to happen and to breathe deeply. And then to start to depersonalize the situation, meaning take myself out of the story and just look at the story. And if this was happening to somebody else, what would I tell that other person to do? And then I take that advice. Depersonalization in Buddhism is referred to as disidentification, and in Hinduism it's referred to as non-attachment. I prefer depersonalization, taking the person out of it and then looking at the story, because it is just really a story. Most of all, I've learned to never stop hoping. I've learned to wake up every single day and think something insanely amazing may happen today. And so I got to be ready. My teacher, Joan, who passed away last year, whenever we gathered as a community in her last 2 years, she died of bone cancer, we would gather at her place and she would lecture. And she would sit down in her zero-gravity chair because she had bone cancer and she was in measured pain, treated pain, but she was in pain nonetheless. And she would look at everybody and she would start off by just saying, "We're still here." And I remember I wrote it down. When she said it, I wrote it down. And I believe that on a spiritual level, there's a reason for that. I believe with all of the things that could have taken any one of us out, the illnesses, the breakups, the self-esteem issues, the poverty, the addiction, whatever could have done us in, didn't. And we're still here. And there's a reason for that. And I believe we are given an opportunity every day that we're vertical to go out and live big with love and with hope, with community, with all of it. And so why aren't we? Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, thank you, thank you. For starters, I want to let you know, I know that I'm 4 minutes past, but we do have a microphone down here for a Q&A if anybody wants to ask any questions, if anybody wants to make any comments, any statements. But I really do want to thank you guys for showing, because I don't assume that you will. I never will. But I know that this is why I'm in this body, is to get this kind of work done. And that doesn't happen if there's not someone to receive. I can give it, but there needs to be a receiving end of it. And you came and you received. And I don't take that for granted, and I never will. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I think it's a truism.
Tell me.
That
Come closer to the mic. Mike. His name's Mike.
Can I take this out? Whoops. I think it's a truism that parents really don't know their children. And a few years ago, when Bram wrote his first book, and I went to
The book launch.
the book launch, a young fellow came up to me and he said, "Mr. Levinson, do you know the reputation of your son?" And I said, "No, not really." He said, Mr. Levinson, it's not just about yoga. He's everybody's mentor. He's everybody's guru. And Bram, listening to you tonight, I now understand why. I think you are great.
Thanks, Daddy.
So I just want to say how proud I am of you. You are just incredible.
Woo!
Thanks, Papa. Yeah, come. Oh, when you speak like close to it. Oh, I think he put it backwards. Yeah, there you go.
Like this?
There you go.
I've been thinking about this for the last few weeks, but especially a few days ago when in Iran there was a big earthquake and all those people died.
I saw that.
I'm trying to see if I was there, how can I be positive? How can I take the person out of it?
Mm-hmm.
I do.
It's an excellent question. I think that when we're in moments where it's like fight or die, we don't have the opportunity to do that. I think the instinct to survive just kicks in. It's when you are out of the trauma that you can do the work. And it is when you are out of the trauma that you can look back on it and then go, okay, well, why? Why has that come up? What am I meant to learn from that?
Because you say fine, because I feel like if I was that mom with holding my child dead in my body, I feel I'm again blessed. I'm here and I feel positive and everything. But I feel sometimes I have a hard time being like that because some other people around the world, they don't have this opportunity.
Absolutely.
So how can they play this mental game?
For you living here, for them over there?
For
you
them.
Living here?
Yeah, but for both. Like
Okay, so for you living here, I think that if you have the freedom and the overall well-being enough to be able to ask these questions, then you can fight for them. And I believe that we are meant to raise our voices for those whose voices have been silenced because we have the ability to. We live in one of the most tolerant countries in the world right now. Yeah. I mean, crazy. For them, I don't think that there is anything to do except just fight to survive so they can get to the point where they can then find a roof over their head and food for them and their children and then do the work and then do the healing. But I can tell you that kind of working with the opposites and all that stuff has proven, and also the power of observation, depersonalization, are very effective in helping people move past the trauma who believe this has happened to me and this is now who I am for the rest of my life. It's not. Okay. It's just part of the experience. It's part of the human experience. It's not who you are because re-identification of self tells us we are the energy in the body, not the body itself, and not what happens to the body. And so right there, maybe an answer to what am I meant to learn is, I'm meant to learn that I'm way more than just this.
Awesome. Thank you.
Does that sort of answer your question?
Yes, actually. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
And I love you, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. The feeling is mutual.
We all do.
Hi. I saw you earlier today.
Yeah, me too. You told us before that you were going to say why it was kind of an accident.
Say that, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry.
Yeah, speak closer to the mic.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Hello, testing. You said that it was almost an accident that you were born in this part of the world and you're so lucky to have been born here. Mm. And you said that you were going to tell the story, but you did not. So, like...
I think I was referring to the accidents of life. Joseph Campbell talks about the accidents of life.
I thought that maybe your parents were like on vacation and you were to be born somewhere.
No.
That could have explained your...
I think what it was is I wanted to talk about the accidents of life. Joseph Campbell talks about the accidents of life, and the accidents of life are literally where you're born and the body you're born into and the gender and all that stuff. And that's not an accident. Spiritually speaking, it's not an accident. You're supposed to use all that stuff. When I was a kid, I thought that my accidents of life were meant to be shoved in a corner and repressed and ignored and called by another name and try to pretend it's something else, when in fact what I've grown to learn is that those accidents of life have everything to do with how I show up in the world. You know, I was born into a male body. It is my responsibility as a male to fight for the rights of females, which you don't really see in our world today. And so if I had been born into a female body, my existence would be completely different, and it wouldn't, what I do in the world with women's rights and pay equity and all that stuff, it wouldn't be received the same way. So that's what I was referring to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you twice in a day.
Yeah, same here.
Mom, come up. Oh, shit. Hi, Mama. Do you need help with it?
No.
Okay, good.
I just want to tell you honestly
Yeah.
that I really thought I had left the car in drive. So
I'm
wasn't losing my
sorry.
mind.
I'm sorry because I let you live this long thinking you had done that.
The truth is,
It was me.
I never thought about it again.
Really? Until tonight. Full circle.
And I have to tell you, I am very, very, very proud of you.
Thank you, Mama. Thank you. You have no idea. I've told that story to so many of my friends, and they're like, you never told your parents? And I was like, no, I think I'm saving it for something. I don't know what that is. Anyone else? All right. You guys, thank you. Are you coming up to talk? Come.
You know, Bram, when I do yoga at noon, at lunchtime, and you were teaching at La Luna,
Yeah.
I was just saying, oh, fuck, this is Bram lunch class, and I didn't like it because you were always talking.
That's
But-
it.
You know something, I think for the rest of my life, I will think about this night, and when the tough will get going,
Yeah.
I'll think about you, and I say, just get out of it.
Good.
I'll keep that in mind.
Good. Merci, Vincent. Thank you. Thank you. I don't look back at what I do. I always try and come up with different things for me to do in my career and in my life, and I rarely look back. So I'm blown away by this. I didn't expect this many people, and I'm very, 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 very beyond words grateful that you guys came up. And can I just say, for the people who came tonight to work, to film, and to sell books, and to to introduce me, that means so much to me. And to those, I know there are some of you in the audience who recruited. I want you to know that I appreciate it. I appreciate it because really, my aim is to be able to access as many people as possible to get these tools across because it will make not just our lives better, but our experience of life collectively better, and we need that. We are so starving for that right now because all that we're talking about is what's wrong. There is so much that is right, but it starts up here, and I believe that I'm here to do it. So thank you for showing up. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.